communication with Rccsc. I put this parcel picture here. For those who didn't file, that's what you anticipate. Average application, and if it's smaller, you have to question if you did the right thing. It's about 200 to 400 to 500 pages. It's a big file. It's a parcel, and still submitted on paper, by mail. And speaking of mail, do not submit by regular Canada Post. If it's lost, you have to wait, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, 90 days just to open an investigation, if not 180 days. And then good luck to you if it's lost in the mail somewhere, somehow. You have no trace and no liability, maybe regular insurance of $100. And you will never explain to the client that you submitted by regular mail. Even registered mail is not advisable. We submit by FedEx, it's guaranteed, it's delivered, and they have guaranteed delivery on the signature, and we have it in 2-3 days delivered in person. And it's actually cheaper than regular registered mail for this kind of parcel. So again, how to start communication with Ircc, sorry. Well, if you have the client, coming back to our slide about how to identify red flags, of course, GCMS notes must be ordered, a tip report must be ordered to verify immigration history. It's not that rare. It's rather common when people come in and saying, yeah, well, yes, I applied before, but I have no records. I applied through the agent. Well, first of all, it's probably illegitimate agent, some kind of shady in what we call host consultant somewhere in the middle of nowhere, but they just happen to cross lives and they apply and they have no record and no obligation to save it for 6 years like we have here in Canada, and there is no trace. Can you apply, and how can you be sure that everything the client is saying now is completely in line with what client said 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago? You cannot rely on client's memory if they're already telling you that they don't remember. So the best advice I can give, guys, is request the notes. If you have application number, request the notes, request physical file, see what's there. Yes, physical file delivery is now unfortunately delayed by COVID, but we're getting this in 2-3 months, even though government respond and say, well, it probably will take a year. But so far, knock on wood, files, electronic files coming on time within 30 days period. It's okay. Get it as soon as possible, because you have to verify first admissibility, then potential issues, and then misrepresentation to avoid. So those things. And obviously, you have to identify those issues like background, suitability, what business objectives they have. Yes, you do have to understand the business. And people sometimes say, no, I'm just filing forms. Well, then tell it to the client, because client's expectation usually that you actually responsible for accepting whatever they're talking about in business. Because if you made that impression and you're not, and something happened, then you're potentially liable for providing wrong information or reassuring the client if you were reassuring the client that everything is fine when everything wasn't fine, right? So be careful in that regard, because it's there. It's coming after you if you just say freely, yeah, it's fine. Well, clients notice and you will be liable. So since January 2021, what happened in January 2021? It's good to be in practice on daily basis. In January 2021, the designated organizations were asked, because what they call in Rcc, they sent what they call handlers, or people who work with designated organizations. They send it to the field, and people talk, and people promise from Ircc that they work on case reduction as much as they can. So they try to eliminate the backlog. Another praise for Ircc, they did, actually, they did. And since January, they just asked designated organizations to submit a letter of support, commitment certificate packages to Rcc in a simplified format. So it's not that unusual. They don't need a designated organization is not submitting the full package without supplementary documents. They will follow when they request it. But you have this full package. And when you send the file, PR file, that's why it's so big. When you send the package to immigration, you have to provide everything. There is no simplification on that side. But designated organizations, they deal with Montreal office and they submit it directly, privately, and only documents themselves, leaving supplementary documents in their archive, because verification can go later if questions arise about authenticity or legitimacy of the documents. Applicants submit PR application. That's critical. That's what listener asked me after the first part of the webinar. Validity term of letter of support commitment certificate is 6 months. What it means? It means one thing. You have to provide PR application to Rcc, not to lose ability for people to apply within 6 months validity terms of commitment certificate. And what's going on right now, rarely and under COVID conditions, government is not assigning permanent numbers already and right away. What they do, they assign temporary file numbers, and usually it happens within 2-3 weeks. That's current situation. It's fluid, it's changing, because obviously we're going through third stage of reopening in BC, different stages across Canada with COVID pandemic. But we actually observe that temporary files assigned when government is checking the formal complexity of the file, completion on checklist. They just see, okay, it's here, it's there. Fingerprints and photo for every application must be completed. Biometric centers were closed for a while. Now they allowed to pass, so that's must. That's a must. And medical exam before coming to Canada must be conducted, but that's normal. That's normal, and people must pay attention to certain things, because medical inadmissibility can be done on two cases, on 2 occasions. One is that it's a danger to public's health and safety, and second one, what we call excessive demand. And those who practice must distinguish those two matters, because obviously to be in a first, it's danger to public, you have to fall into very narrow category of illnesses and problems. But for excessive demand, you have to pay attention to the threshold that government implemented and increased the threshold, I believe, 2 years ago. Time flies. So definitely before COVID. So the threshold was increased, and obviously you have to assess. And people sometimes asking me, like, okay, like today I got a question if the person who was treated from cancer can be admitted. Yes, in my view it is, but we cannot give an affirmative answer before the person actually passed medical exam. So we have to act ethically and explain to the person the risk involved. And obviously, if that person is essential, my recommendation, don't make that person essential, because the whole team will depend on a health analysis and situation of this particular person or this particular individual, or sometimes a family member is in trouble. Now, another thing that you have to be aware, that, for example, police certificates, yes, it's not that rare that people come into us and saying, well, from this country, I cannot take it because, well, that happened. What's the latest? Zimbabwe. And no, it's another country. But anyway, it just slipped from my mind. But anyway, you had a country, it was a conflict. It's in Africa actually recently, but country disappeared. How can you get a certificate from the country that does not exist? You have to provide an explanation, and it's on you as a counsel to do that. A similar thing when country, for example, is not issuing certificates that person left, but you live there for 6 or more months in a row after the age of 18. So remember the principle regarding police certificate. If you cannot provide, you have to provide the proof of the best effort possible. Okay, you can't just say, and clients sometimes inclined to do that. They say, well, I cannot get it, take it or leave it. Well, they cannot put ultimatum on you because it's our job is to reverse question to them and say, well, how about this? You take it or leave it, but you reject it because you can provide fundamental documents and we cannot verify your identity and we cannot verify your police records. But if it's really impossible and you show the best efforts to obtain it, it's not rare. We had the situations like that and it's went through well. Yeah, maybe it's slightly delayed in the process, but it's all doable. Another question related to police certificates, and I probably given too much information for people who already practicing, but I see some people who just started in the audience, and I think it's useful to know. Some countries, take US for example, will demand, Canadian authorities will demand police clearance, FBI clearance from the US, even though you spent less than 6 months. Not all the time, but most of the time. And it's better to be prepared and tell your clients that, yes, we see, dear client, that you diligently spent less than 6 months in a row, like 5 months in this year, is like 6 months and minus 2 days. People usually are very careful. Or next year, uh, don't forget, Americans themselves, they have this dim residency rules for taxation and other purposes, so they're very careful to monitor it. And immigration here is inclined to request police clearance, even if you spend 6 months from certain jurisdictions. So it's better to explain to the client that they better obtain it and better provide it. Another angle, I just recently came through secondary experience because once in a while we have it. People say, yeah, I wasn't staying in the country for more than 6 months in a row. I was visiting the country regularly. For what reason, I say? Well, I was a worker on assignments. Well, if you get a contract and you visiting, like for example, in my view, like my client is in, let's say, Dubai, and he's traveling to Oman because it's quite close, and he's traveling almost like on daily basis, maybe weekly basis, but never, never, ever 6 months in a row because family is still back home. I always advise people to obtain it because it depends on the status in the country. Sometimes because you have a status, they don't actually stamp your passport all the time. They just wave and check through the system, and they don't have any record. So you don't have any proof how long you stay there, right? So it's better to obtain because your permit allowed you to stay for more than 6 months. And people sometimes arrogantly demand that you submit without police clearance. I always tell clients, listen, you better be prepared. You better obtain that police clearance. Police clearance. Let's do it together before immigration requested that, because that will delay your file, dear client. That's it. It's so simple. People say, Alex, why your files are so fast? Well, because we tell people what they need before immigration requested. That's why. So, and don't forget, I, for example, always tell people honestly, don't change anything in your life before you have copper. And confirmation of permanent residency is critical to have before people have arrangements. And by arrangements, I mean personal affairs, selling property, taking kids from school, quitting job. And some people actually, well, I'm not bragging, it's just a fact because they said thank you so many times during COVID because I told them that. And some lawyers actually ignore the fact that people have to have copper before they change something because A, copper is valid for a few months or until medical test expiration date, which is obviously way before copper is expired. And you have time. I always tell people you have time to arrange your affairs, but unless you have copper, don't change anything. And what happened with COVID? We had client who actually disobeyed my advice and was crying because he quit his job, went to his country, decided that he is okay because we told him about the timing and we told him about the process. We warned him not to do that. He said, no, 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 it's a job that ended and there is no extension. I'm not in a position to look for another contract in the country where he was working. And that was fine. I said, okay, fine, but you understand the consequences. What if something happened? He said, nothing will happen. I trust you. Well, trust in me is good, but you have to be careful. Again, another proverb I pick up somewhere in the Middle East: trust Allah, but tie your camel. You cannot just go and say, I trust God, so I tie my camel, nobody will take him. No, somebody will steal your camel, or he will run away. That's what it means believe in God, or rely on God rather, in this situation. People say, well, I trust you and I cancel and I move, and then they bug you and coming back and bite you because they say, well, you told me everything will be done in 12 months. COVID happened. You cannot blame that for delay, because that's not you. That's force majeure. That's beyond your control. How can you actually be responsible for that? But if you tell the client not to do that, not to cancel the job, not to sell the property because of this, if life dictates or life demands, that's fine.